There are growing calls for the Victorian government to hit the pause button or even scrap what's been described as the biggest and most expensive infrastructure project in Australia's history.
Suburban Rail Loop will deliver faster and more convenient travel for all Victorians.
This project has never stacked up because no one seems to be clear about what problem it's trying to solve, but it is blowing a generation's worth of infrastructure money.
Experts are speaking out against the Suburban Rail Loop ahead of the imminent signing of a key tunnelling contract.
We are talking a lot of dollars. The construction cost altogether over time, probably over $100 billion. And by the time you add in a bunch of running costs, you're starting to talk something closer to $200 billion.
So the eastern section from Cheltenham round to Box Hill is Suburban Rail Loop East, and it's joined with
the Suburban Rail Loop is a 90-kilometre orbital train line, connecting every major train line from Melbourne southeast to the west.
Well, we first heard about it 3 months out from the 2018 Victorian election, so it was announced with great fanfare.
I do think that investing particularly in rail transport for our future is a very positive thing to do.
It would make cross-suburban trips much easier, much quicker by public transport.
Public transport advocate Daniel Bowen is supportive of the project, but is concerned about its potential design flaws.
Ultimately, public transport needs to be as convenient as possible. If you've got long walks to make a train connection and a long walk at your destination, such as Monash Uni, then you may look at that option and say, well, that's not for me, I'll keep driving, I'll stay in the car.
It'll benefit developers. It will benefit, people will make a lot of money out of this. This is a very poor design feature.
Planning expert Michael Buxton says the Suburban Rail Loop is also a land grab. The authority managing the project has power over planning decisions, covering a 1.6 kilometre radius of all new stations.
Is it going to be all high-rise? What's going to be the mix of land uses between commercial and residential, for example? Nobody knows any of those questions. This is all being done behind closed doors. So the project was cooked up behind closed doors, and the future planning is being done behind closed doors.
The origins of the Suburban Rail Loop were confined to a small circle of Victorian Labor stalwarts in 2017. It was conceived through a process led by current chairman of Slater and Gordon, James Mackenzie, and former Labor staffer Tom Considine. Both men later got jobs working for the project. They were also assisted by a small group from PwC, led by CEO Luke Sayers. Non-disclosure agreements were signed to stop any information leaks.
It had been developed in a very secretive way, so without the involvement of the Department of Transport, Infrastructure Victoria or the Cabinet. So it was unleashed at that time, but with almost no details.
The authority managing the rail loop insists the project's development was not unusual. Head of think tank Per Capita and former federal Labor policy advisor Emma Dawson disagrees.
Even those people that say, I'm looking forward to there being a connection from Cheltenham to the airport, need to know that the spending on that's coming from their taxes is being spent efficiently and is going to build the best network that the state can afford and isn't going into the pockets of companies that are then, taking excessive profit margins.
The Allen Bond excuse doesn't. How do we accept that? I don't recall. I mean, how do we accept that?
Are you calling Mr Hirschhorn a liar?
I'm not calling anyone.
Well, one of you is not telling the truth.
Senator, please. This is a respectful place.
One of those involved with the project was former PwC CEO Luke Sayers, a personal friend of former Premier Daniel Andrews. He was the chief executive of consultancy firm PwC from 2012 to 2020, at the height of the scandal involving the firm's leaking of federal government plans to rein in multinational tax avoiders to PwC's global tax dodging clients.
Do you consider Luke Sayers a personal friend, and if so, are you disappointed by this alleged conduct?
I would say he's a friend, yes, but that's not a matter of, that doesn't cut across any of the professional dealings I have with him. I very rarely deal with him on professional terms.
By outsourcing sensitive government work to private interests, this is always going to be a risk. The only way to completely remove that risk is to restore the capacity and the expertise within the public sector and do that work within government.
In recent years, the use of consultants by the Victorian government has ballooned. The Auditor-General found government departments spent more than $500 million on consultants over 4 years, and more than half of that was spent on the top 5 consultancies, including PwC. In 2021, the Victorian government hired KPMG to come up with a business case for the Suburban Rail Loop. It outlined the project's economic and job benefits. The report was criticised by the Victorian Auditor-General, who described it as lacking sufficient supporting evidence.
This looks like a very political project to me. I think the timing of its announcement and the manner of its development are hard to explain in any other way.
7:30 can reveal that KPMG and PwC audit clients stand to benefit from lucrative contracts for work associated with the project. In light of the PwC tax leak scandal, 7:30 asked the consulting firms and audit clients if they work together on Suburban Rail Loop contract bids. PwC said no, while KPMG declined to comment. Akiona and Lang O'Rourke said neither consulting company was involved in its tenders.
There are only so many companies with the capability to take on that kind of work. It's not surprising that they use one of the big 4 consulting firms. It can create amongst some people a perception, again, that there's something very cosy and untoward going on. And I think by avoiding outsourcing government activities like public service advice, then you avoid that perception.
Economists say the state government faces a huge funding hole. The federal Labor government has committed $2.2 billion to the project and has requested a more credible business case before it commits more money.
If I were in charge of cutting back on infrastructure, I think I'd have started with the biggest and baddest infrastructure program we have. Again, that's Suburban Rail Loop. A lot of dollars, not a lot of benefit.
The Suburban Rail Loop Authority is due to sign a multi-billion-dollar tunnelling contract before the end of the year. The Victorian Infrastructure Minister, Danny Pearson, and the chair of the Suburban Rail Loop Authority, James Merlino, a former Labor Deputy Premier, declined our requests for interview. Is there something here that the government's seeing that perhaps the likes of yourself and other experts aren't?
I'd love to hear it if there is.